Well, welcome, hello first, and welcome everyone to our webinar today. I must confess I'm really proud and glad that this event is happening because I think and I believe that in the next several minutes, and it's going to be even more than an hour, we are going to go in a world of the future, I would say, because the topic that we are going to talk about is much connected with things that are just entering the world of marketing and sales automation and are developing with a speed that is incredible. So I would say to everyone who is really interested and who is really into the world of sales and marketing and wants to always know the latest trends, that what we are going to talk about is exactly this, because you know, probably everyone who is here, who is a part of the webinar today, knows that we are going to talk about automation, and automation is like the future of marketing and sales processes, because nowadays in this world, which is so dynamic and everything is happening so fast, we need a software which would do every repetitive task possible in order for people to focus on the strategy, to focus on optimizing, on bettering processes. And for this to happen, for this to be possible at all, we need a software that would do everything else, everything that is repetitive, everything that a machine, a computer can do. So I think this is a topic which really will be going much common in the next several months and years, and that's why I'm really grateful that here we have a guest which whose company started this a long time ago, especially for the world of marketing and sales ago. When I give her the word, she will say how long she's been into this. And just before going on and giving the word to our guests, just several more things about the event and the event series you're a part of now. You know, the Inbound is one of Limacon's monthly events. It's an event series which is specifically designed and specifically dedicated to this part of marketing, which is probably in most of the cases the most efficient marketing part is the inbound marketing. Basically, this is a whole philosophy. It's a philosophy which includes many things, and that's why we have decided to really do an event series on this, because in order to be really good, really on the top of every trend of the inbound marketing, you need to always watch such events and always read about inbound marketing things that are really dynamic. So I hope this event will be really interesting for you. And now I would give the word to this wonderful Nicole, who is now online from South Africa, just from another continent. You know, we are here people, not just the lecturers, but we have people from the audience from 2 continents. So this is really, again, something really interesting. And I hope the topic will be interesting for both people here in Europe and people in South Africa. And if we have people from other continents as well. So yeah, without losing much time, I'll give the word now to Nicole. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak here today. As you said, automation is something really close to my heart. I've been working on inbound marketing. I thought of it earlier because I thought you would ask that question. And I thought, well, how many years has it been? And it's been about 6 years that I've been working with HubSpot and inbound marketing. And I've seen HubSpot change a lot. I've seen HubSpot change, you know, remove things and then add them back. Which is an interesting one, because you don't usually expect them to change their minds.
Yeah, probably 5 or 6 years ago, this is the beginning of automation, in fact, because more than 5 and 6 years, almost nobody has heard of this, I think. So you're like one of the pioneers of sales and marketing automation, which is really great.
Oh, thank you. So I we connected over a common interest in automation, and yeah, I'm really excited to share this with all of you. I'm going to just let you know a little bit about myself. So I'm a principal inbound marketing strategist at Spitfire Inbound, and I'll share a little bit about what we do in a moment. But I really am passionate about inbound marketing, about training people on inbound marketing, and all spheres of inbound, not just marketing, but inbound to marketing, sales, and service. And over the last few years, I've been working on HubSpot, and yeah, just grown a passion for the tool and knowing how it works, and sharing that with other people. And at Spitfire Inbound, we're a company focused on growth. So we drive sales leads, we drive value for people, and we assist people with a data-driven process. And part of that, so you'll see that my presentation today doesn't say Spitfire Inbound, it says Spitfire Academy. And that's part of our training arm of our business, where we give presentations like this. We do courses with people where we teach them to use HubSpot better. So yeah, part of what I do is spend my day talking about what you can do with HubSpot and how you can drive your strategy through things like automation. Please feel free to ask as many questions of the chat as we go. Either I'll let you know that they're coming later on and I'll answer them later, or I'll answer them as they come up. What were you going to say?
Yeah, just wanted to say several words about HubSpot, as I'm sure most of the people watching know what HubSpot is, just for the sake of saying it. If somebody doesn't know, several words about HubSpot as a platform. In fact, HubSpot is one of the largest and one of the most powerful tools for organizing, managing, and effectively maintaining all the processes around marketing, around sales, and around service. Recently, they even launched some new features around their new CMS. So basically everything which is connected with the parts of acquiring new clients, a business acquiring new clients, and then letting them not to go, but to stay and to be really delighted by what you are sharing with them and what you're offering to them, you can find in HubSpot in an amazing way. And a part of what is so amazing about HubSpot is exactly that you can automate things. So apart from the fact that HubSpot is among the top 3 platforms in the world for such processes, it's one of the top platforms, one of the biggest platforms offering really a great variety of automation tools and options. So in fact, HubSpot has given us so much that it really depends on our creativity on how great workflows and automations we are going to have in our strategy and processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I suppose why we love HubSpot and why we're sharing about it today. So my intention today is to challenge you to expand the way that you think about automation and the way you think about HubSpot's tools, so that you can help improve efficiency, automate menial tasks, and accelerate your marketing, sales, and service efforts. And really, what I'm hoping is that you will fall in love with HubSpot's workflow and automation tools, and that I'll be able to inspire you with some interesting ideas. So I'm really hoping that that's what's going to happen today. And as I said, ask questions, and let's sort of share ideas. I'd love to see how other people are using the tools. So if you have an interesting idea, I'd love to chat about it. So, right, so we should jump straight into the content, I guess. No need to wait any longer. Let's jump right into it. So just starting with workflows, I want to just set the groundwork just a little bit so that there's some context to the fact that HubSpot or automation tools can be used for both external outreach, so reaching out, sending emails, and connecting with contacts, things like lead nurturing, but it can also be used for internal processes. And if you're not using it to manage your business's daily operations, you're not using it to improve efficiency, you're missing out on some of the real power of HubSpot. There's so many things that you can do, and I could, the people at Spitfire will tell you that at Spitfire Inbound, if you get me started, I'll talk to you about workflows for the rest of the evening. Thankfully, they've put a time limit on me.
Exactly, and yeah, here we had a webinar last week, and that was exactly I emphasized on. Many people think that automation is mainly about email marketing and about such basic things. Yeah, email marketing can be automated in a really great way, but this is just a little small particle of what we are able to do with the automation that HubSpot provides. So basically, today we can automate really a lot of things. And I'm glad that Nicole has prepared some unique examples, because I know almost what she's going to present.
Cool. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about before I talk about workflows in HubSpot, one of the things that most people who have the sales tools in HubSpot forget about is HubSpot sequences. So in Sales Professional and Enterprise, you get a cool tool, a tool called sequences. And if you haven't heard about it, sequences are a sales, basically a sales automation that allow you to send targeted, personal, well-timed emails to customers and prospects out of your email inbox in such a way that you can automatically trigger them. So you can trigger follow-up tasks, you can trigger, and then you can unenroll people from that sequence based on an email reply or a meeting booking. So it's a really good sales automation, and many people forget about it because, you know, the workflows tool is sort of the bigger tool that's, you know, there's so many options you can do, they forget about this tool. So when would you use a sequence? Well, the important thing to note about a sequence is you would use a sequence to automate sales processes that you already have. You're going to take the sales process that your best salespeople already use, map that out, and create a sequence to automate those steps. So as you said earlier, it's about taking that, you know, that best salesperson and then automating and increasing the productivity of that salesperson. So you could send one based on following up on a quote sent. So salespeople know that once they send a quote, they wait a couple of days and then they send a follow-up email. Well, why not send the quote and then automate the follow-up email if the person hasn't replied? Or if you phoned a contact and you say you left a voicemail, you could do a follow-up email going, well, if they haven't replied within 3 days, let me send a workflow. You know, so, and it's personal. But the important thing to note about a sequence is that it is a template. It is a sales automation template series, which is quite different to a workflow. So you would use it. Here's an example. So you'll see that this has been created. It's a template, and there are areas of personalization tokens, just like in workflow emails, marketing emails, like you've seen before. But there's also areas that the salesperson themselves will have to automate, will have to customize for the contact. So you're going to enroll contacts manually or using a list of up to 50 people. And then you can send follow-up automations, and then a contact will be unenrolled either manually or based on taking the action of setting a meeting or replying to an email. And that's a really powerful tool. I'd love to know in the chat if anyone is using the sequences tool. So if you're chatting with us on Facebook or in the Zoom link, you're welcome to just let us know if you're using sequences. I'd love to know what you think of the tool if you're using it.
Yeah, and just something else to mention. if you look at the charts, if you look at the statistics, some of the biggest issues and some of the biggest complaints of salespeople is that they are involved really much into some administrative work, some things that they don't really like, because this is not their primary task. You know, their primary task is to go and approach someone in a way that they will they will start desiring what you offer to them. And by using such an automation, your administrative tasks really get a little fewer. So that's the idea of this. I remember there was a statistic recently that I read that if you use such email sequences, you have, if you use those sequences regularly, you have around 10% more time to really do your primary tasks, which is to find new contacts, to find new people, and offer them in a personalized way what you're using or what you're offering.
And who couldn't use with 10% more time? Absolutely. Right, so moving on from sales automation, the biggest focus of today's session is actually talking about HubSpot workflows. Ooh, excuse me. That's always have to have the technical moment. Sorry, just clicking through there. Right, so keep in mind, so there's a couple of important considerations when you're building a workflow. The very first one to consider is when you're going to start building a workflow, where do you start? Well, my advice to you is start with the goal. If you know why you're building the workflow and you know what you're trying to achieve, then the workflow will be really easy to build and map out. And then when it comes to mapping it out, nothing really beats good old pen and paper, but there's also the whiteboard and the Koki. Well, we call it a Koki in South Africa. I'm not sure what you call it, what you call it in Bulgaria. You'll have to give me a translation for that. But nothing beats a whiteboard and a whiteboard marker or a set of Post-it notes. You can take the Post-it notes and actually map out your workflow on the Post-it notes. And then as you change your mind and move things around, you can map them out on the Post-it notes and then take a picture when you're done. So brainstorm, plan, and then build your workflow. There are so many actions that HubSpot can do. You know, if you start digging into the tool and you start looking at the different enrollment triggers and the different actions that HubSpot can do, you can actually almost get lost in all of that. So check them out. I would recommend if you're getting started with workflows and you go, well, where do I start? Start by building the workflow. You know, look at the options available, test them out, see what's there, and just don't set it live because you obviously don't want to do that. And then another consideration to keep in mind of this is that the settings tab is your best friend when it comes to workflows. So this is a workflow that I've built. So you map it out and you build it, and you can see that there's various options. And if you haven't used the HubSpot workflow tool in a little while, it will look really different. If this is the first time you're seeing it, HubSpot's made a whole bunch of really cool updates to the tool recently, which include adding labels to each of your if-then branches within the workflows, the ability to jump from one action to another action so that you only need to build one chain at a time. So I would absolutely recommend that if you're getting started with workflows and you're not sure what it does, well, I have a cheat for you, save you some time. Here in the presentation, there's a link. So we'll share the presentation with you and you'll see a guide to workflow actions. That link over there has got a really good unpacking guide that explains all the different workflow actions if you don't want to go and test it out for yourself. But yeah, I would say start, test it, and then look at the settings tab. So one of the places that I find, and I'm going to jump back in here, one of the things I find is that people build in actions and they jump straight to setting it live. They miss out on two really important sections. The first one is settings. So when should I send my workflow? Should I send it at any time? or a specific time, how does that relate? Is there a campaign I should be tracking this against? And then unenrollment and suppression. Now, I'm sure that unenrollment and suppression requires more attention, and we'll get to that in a moment as we go through the workflow considerations. Yeah, so as you start to build your workflows and you're working through that, the next thing you need to consider is goals. So goals within workflows, so obviously you start with the goal of why you're building the workflow, but the goals tool within the workflow measures how many contacts or custom deals or whatever object workflow you're building. It measures how many of those have met that goal criteria. So you can set a property and say, for example, I would like to make the goal of this workflow that somebody's filled out a form. And then I can say, okay, anybody who meets this criteria will then be removed from the workflow. So it's really important, if you're talking about goals within workflows, that you set that criteria to allow people to move from one list to the next. So in this case, this workflow is set up so that a person gets a notification that says, okay, please go and check and associate contacts with any open deals. And if they haven't done it, then it gets escalated. And if that still hasn't happened, we then make a list. So once a person gets updated and their contact record gets updated, they would then be removed from the workflow, and we could then not put them into this list, and we would know that our database is clean. So that's an example of a way that you could use workflows. But there's so many considerations in terms of workflows, and I think looking at the settings and looking at the available options is really important.
Yeah, and I would add something here as well. Yeah, you can try and test everything out by yourself. And another advice, in order for you to speed up this process of learning and knowing how to set everything up in a way which would be correct, which would be effective, which would work, is to find some really great tutorials and some really great trainings that are available on the internet. And this way, I think you would speed up the process, because if you just go into the software itself, and if you haven't done any workflows before, firstly, you're going to have some hassle orientating yourself around everything which is available there, because it's really a lot. After that, it's like a game. It's like becoming better at this game. But firstly, it may be a little more stressful. So I would advise you to find even someone who first can help you with all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that you would immediately need help with if you start working on HubSpot's workflows is firstly understanding the different types of workflows. So when you should use which of these. So standard workflows are triggered by an action. So someone fills in a form, or they've created a list, or there's a property. And then fixed date is set around a specific date. So so today I could use a fixed date workflow to send you an email saying the webinar is starting in an hour. So that workflow or a newsletter, that's where you'd use a fixed date. So for product launches or updates, and it's based around a shared calendar date or a particular moment in time. And then there's property-based dates workflows. Those are around a unique calendar date for each and every contact. And the best example I can think of that is a birthday. So it could be a follow-up. It could be based on something like a reminder to renew your subscription or your license. But a simple example is sending your contacts a message on their birthday going, happy birthday. That's as simple as a property-based workflow, but then you could make it more advanced. So those are the different kinds of workflows. And then just keep in mind that every object within HubSpot, and objects are contacts, customers, deals, tickets, and products. those objects, you can create workflows that are triggered by each of those objects within HubSpot. So keep in mind that a deal workflow would be triggered and have deal properties available. So the most common one that people use for lead nurturing would be a contact workflow, but there are so many options available. And you'll see some of the examples as we go through them. Yeah. Now you've got your type of workflow, you've got your goal, you've mapped it out. There's just a couple more things that you need to think about. The next one you need to think about is exclusion criteria. So especially when you build your first workflow, it's great. You can enroll anyone you like in this lead nurturing workflow. They're only going to get that one email. But as you start building out your nurturing efforts and you start building out your different lists and you start adding automation, what you'll start to find is that contacts are now getting multiple emails from different, with different messages in them. And that's where suppression criteria and unenrollment rules are so critical for your success. So jumping back into HubSpot, if you go to settings and you look at unenrollment and suppression, you'll see that you can, when someone gets enrolled in the workflow, you have a choice to do nothing or remove them from from specific other workflows, or remove them from all other workflows. I would caution that removing them from all other workflows could be negative because it might remove them from a deal workflow that they're in, or it might remove them from a contact property update workflow that you need them to be in. So rather mapping it out, get out your whiteboard or your post-it notes or whatever your preferred pen and paper, whatever your choice is, and map it out and decide where this workflow sits within the bigger scheme of all your workflows, and then choose your unenrollment criteria. One other really cool way to do this is to use a suppression list. So for example, if you were to be nurturing somebody and you use the criteria became a marketing qualified lead as the criteria, you could say if they have received the, if they've been enrolled in a marketing in the lead, like a lead nurturing campaign in the last 6 weeks, don't send them that email because you don't want to be too pushy. You don't want to send them lead nurturing workflow after nurturing workflow. So you may want to suppress them for a period of time, and you can use time-based list criteria for this suppression workflow, which is really handy. Sometimes you've got to read the instructions here quite carefully. So when you look at this, it says, when a contact no longer meets the enrollment conditions, remove them. Just read very carefully what it says, because sometimes it can be quite tricky. You don't want to necessarily remove them or not. So there's also this option when they no longer meet the criteria. So if the enrollment criteria is they're a marketing qualified lead, send them nurturing emails. If they become a sales qualified lead, you'll want to remove them from that workflow. So then you would use yes, remove them. And then always make sure in the settings tab, although workflows save automatically, it might seem like a silly one, but although workflows save automatically, the settings need to be saved manually. So just keep that in mind as you're working through that. And then the final thing to consider, there's a couple more, and the one is re-enrollment. And re-enrollment is one of those really cool things that, again, it doesn't sit on the main page. You've got to click through that to the re-enrollment criteria. And it's easily forgotten because it's a step that you don't have to jump through for you to set up a workflow. And essentially, re-enrollment is critical to getting a really good workflow going. So remember that objects that are re-enrolled in a workflow, they have to meet one of the starting criteria and any one of these ticked re-enrollment criteria. But one thing that's really interesting about that is that you can firstly manually re-enroll someone, and then they don't have to meet any criteria because you've manually re-enrolled them. And if your filter that you're using is a refined filter. So it's a filter of where something hasn't happened in a period of days. So for example, if you say filter by last number of days, or if you filter by the number of times a person has visited a web page, for example, this re-enrollment criteria will ignore that secondary filter. So for example, your enrollment criteria has visited the product page 3 times or more, then they will get enrolled for the first time off of that. If you then tick that setting again, the next time they visit that page, they will be re-enrolled again, unless they're currently still in that workflow. So just keep that in mind as a little bit of a pro tip for re-enrollment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then one more thing is, and although it would be very cool, HubSpot does not allow you to use calculated properties like the lead score as a re-enrollment criteria within HubSpot. Yeah, there is a guide to that within the slides. So if you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of information, how am I going to remember all of that? Don't worry, it's all in the slides, and you'll be able to access that later. Cool. Are there no questions there? Is there anything you want to add?
I would, something that just popped it in my mind, again, something like advice for everyone who is going to go in the world of automations and workflows. I would advise you when, for example, when we are onboarding a new client who wants to automate some of their processes, what we are doing is something like a technical file where we are describing every step of the automations and every process which would be possible to automate, of course, after getting to know their internal and external processes better. So that's my advice to you. Don't go into this software before you if you haven't thought about what exactly you want to automate, because again, you're going to get confused for sure. Or if you are not going to get confused, you are at least not going to take the best of this software. That's why take your time, think several days or even several weeks about every process, every single process in your company that probably can be automated. Write this out and then try to really automate it. And then if you can't, search for help.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So I said whiteboard it, but whiteboard it in relationship with all the other processes, absolutely, and then map it out in a way that you can access it again. Yeah, absolutely. And then I admit really honestly that this is an area I'm not very good at, and anyone at Spitfire will attest to the fact that I'm not great at filing. But one important thing about workflows, along with everything else in HubSpot, is naming conventions, naming conventions, naming conventions.
Yes.
So you're never going to find it unless you name it correctly. So we've got a naming convention that we use, and I'm getting a lot better at it, as you can see from the workflow I had there. The action, the trigger, and the date. And along with that, you can also, if you've got a multi-domain portal, you can put that brand domain in there as well. You can put in multi-language in there. If you're working in different countries, you can use country-specific naming conventions, and absolutely build out a set of conventions that you're going to use in your portal and stick to it. And I can honestly say, it's come from personal experience, going, that naming convention, even if you don't need it now, in 6 months' time or a year's time, you may need it. You may go, well, I don't remember why we did this or where it came from. But if you've named it correctly, you'll be able to find it, remember, and access it. So yeah, it's a that's my pro tip based on the fact that it's a really good learning that I've experienced.
And another reason for doing such naming conventions, yeah, at the beginning, it's really boring process to just name everything after a correct order. But at the end, the results are really great, because another reason for this is, we're living in 21st century. People are changing jobs very often. And, you see how many things, how many details you have in such a software, and probably it's inevitable that more than one people is going to work in your software, in your own, for example, HubSpot software, or even people are going to change. And how are you going to provide all this information to the new person if you don't have those simple naming conventions? He's or she's going to get totally lost if you don't have such legacy.
Absolutely. Right, so now you've considered all the options, you've come up with this brilliant plan, you've built your workflow, and you're ready to go live. And the last thing you need to do is test. Test it, preview for contacts, run some sample tests. So determine for yourself, will this contact be enrolled or not? This is obviously a sample contact, so it doesn't get enrolled. But you can run the simulation over and over, and it's never going to send anything to the contact. So you can feel free to test the branching logic, have a look at how it's going to work, and make sure you run those tests. Send yourself the emails, and really have a look and make sure that it works. If you need to run those tests multiple times, you can do that. But it is really important to test it. It might be a really simple workflow, but every now and then you say is known instead of is unknown, or you choose a wrong property. So it's always best to have a hypothesis. So say to yourself, what am I expecting to happen? I'm expecting 200 people to be in this list. Okay, I turn it on and it says there's 2,000 people. All right, now I'm confused. Where did I go wrong? So running a test, kind of knowing how many people you expect to be in that workflow, helps you to make sure that you're on the right track. And then when you're ready to go live, one thing you need to do is, you'll notice when you start, and every single workflow says this, it tells you roughly how many contacts you're expecting to be enrolled in the workflow. And it asks you this question, and you'll see that the button to turn on a workflow is switched off until you answer the question, do you want to enroll contacts who already meet the trigger criteria? So the answer no means you from those 118 people will not be enrolled, and yes means that they will be enrolled. So yes means that everyone who's met the trigger already is going to get enrolled, and no means that it will only start enrolling people from now. Especially if you're setting up new deal automations. It's very important to click the no. If you're setting up deal automations, you don't want to send salespeople hundreds of tasks to update deals that they've already updated, or give them a backlog of too many tasks, because they'll just go, oh, this is rubbish, and they'll move on with it. So it's really important to just think through that process. You don't want to frustrate your leads either. And once you've done that, you can then turn your workflow on. Again, make sure that you look at every single setting, not just the one that allows you to switch the workflow on. And then you're ready to go. You've turned on your workflow and it's running for you in the background. I've obviously, at being a test, I'm not going to switch this on. I'm sure that the people at Spitfire would not so much appreciate lead notification workflows tonight.
Yeah.
Right, so so here's some practical examples, and I think as you said earlier, George, there's so many things that you can do with workflows, but here are a few of the workflows that you really should use, and I'll take you through each of these examples in a moment. So the first thing you can use lead nurturing for, and it seems very obvious, but it's lead nurturing, sending a series of personalized emails to people who've expressed interest. So if someone fills out a form to download a piece of content, you're going to send them a follow-up email, you're going to send them the content, and you're going to start talking to them. Keeping in mind that the delay and the number of emails is determined by how much interest they've shown. You know, did you send them a really high value piece of content? Then potentially that shows a lot of interest. You can send them more emails or more frequently. Best practices to start says to start with, when it comes to email sending, start with a delay of between 5 and 35 days, which is a very big gap. But start with, depending on the size of the information. So if you're sending them, you know, a checklist, potentially you can start with a smaller gap and trial it out, test it and see what works. A lot of people use the cadence 5, 7, 9. You know, they decide to send in increments or longer increments as they send people those emails. But test it out, see what works for your audience. And if you don't have data, you've got to put a peg in the sand. You've got to kind of go, okay, I'm going to try something. And many people start with the number 5 and they delay from 5 days onwards. But you think about what you would do human to human. So if you were sending me those emails as a, one-on-one conversation, would you wait 3 weeks to follow up, or would you send it a bit sooner? And think about that and use that as your guide. Because there's no magic number, but think about how humans like to be spoken to, how the people like to be spoken to.
Yeah, and here what I would add, exactly, I really like the word human that you used. Recently I heard a quote that said, there is no more B2C or B2B or B2G, there is only human to human now, because every relationship, every connection, especially in the world of sales of marketing, is connected to human style and personalization, and everything which comes after this. If you are not personalized enough, you cannot do anything. And here is probably a myth that I would deny. A lot of people who are not really into automation say that if you automate things, you're not personalized. And I would say that, yeah, this would be true only if you don't do good automations. If you are an amateur in automation, yeah, but if you are really good, if you are a creator, if you are a genius, if you excel at automation, then you can be even better than a human at personalizing everything. Because that's the idea of automation, exactly, to personalize.
Yeah, so as you say that, these emails over here don't have to be static emails. They can have smart content. The HubSpot tool allows you to make dynamic or smart content that personalizes based on a list criteria. So absolutely, just because you're sending one email doesn't mean it's the same email to everyone who gets enrolled. So you can use if-then branches or smart content or a combination of both to really target that information and make it personalized within your lead nurturing.
Yes.
Right. Sorry, I'm backwards there. The next thing that you can do is you can use workflows, and this seems like a really simple one, to set, copy, or update contact properties. So this is a massive time saver because nobody likes to do admin updating contact properties. No, it's not a fun thing to do. No one wakes up in the probably no one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to update contact properties. But HubSpot can do that for you. So if the contact meets a condition to, for example, become a lead, you can set the lifecycle stage to become a lead. You don't need to manually go and do that process. And what I love about this is that updating lifecycle stage is a really cool option for that. Because when lifecycle stage particularly is a contact property that has a that has a catch to it. So I can move forward within lifecycle stages. So I can move from lead to marketing qualified lead to sales qualified lead. But if I'm a sales qualified lead and I meet the goal for being a marketing qualified lead, I won't then move back into marketing qualified lead. The only way to do that is to clear the property and move them back. And I would recommend really thinking through when you clear those properties and when you don't. Another consideration here that this diagram makes me think of is, how do you know when you should do one workflow for multiple activities, or when using if-then branches? Or how do you know when you should make it multiple workflows? So in the example that you've got in front of you, you'll see that this is to update lifecycle stages. So it's the same action happening, but because of the fact that the trigger, the conditions to meets the conditions to become a lead, meets the conditions to become a marketing qualified lead are different, because the trigger is different, I would use separate workflows. So my rule of thumb is, if the trigger is the same, then you can have one workflow combined and use if-then branches. But if the actions are the same and the trigger is different, you would need separate workflows to do those actions.
Yes, exactly. And especially for really the professionals, the ones who are deep into workflows, this is quite a good piece of advice, I think, because after all, yeah, HubSpot gives you the ability, gives you the opportunity to create really a lot of workflows, but still there are some restrictions. And in order for you to have every possible process automated and still be under these restrictions, be able to host every single workflow inside of HubSpot, this is good to think what you can optimize. And if you have built two workflows that can be merged into one, then do this because there will come a time, probably if not now, then in 1 year time or in several years time, when you will be searching for ways to minimize the number of workflows in order for you to have the opportunity to create more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope so. We hope that people are so in love with workflows that they build so many that they reach the limit, right? Okay, so the next thing you can do using workflows is you can create tasks, and you can create tasks for a whole bunch of things. For example, updating deal properties, following up with the contact, and you can not only create the task, but you can add context into the task. So, for example, you could create, as in the example here, call, and then it gives you the contact's name for next steps and assigned to a specific person. So you can absolutely use behavioral, a trigger of somebody's behavior to then trigger off a task. So if somebody visits the product page, a current customer visits the product page, you could for example, make a task that says to the contact owner, follow up with them to see, what they're looking for, because they already have that product, or whatever it is. You can use this to really automate your follow-up process. The next thing that you can use workflows for is to create deals and tickets. So deals and tickets are completely separate objects within HubSpot, but they work in a very similar way. So I've combined them because the functionality is much the same, but they're used in different ways. So tickets being customer support queries, and deals being sales opportunities. So you can use workflows to create, assign, update properties, associate contacts to a deal or a ticket. So all of that is automated. So you can copy properties between, for example, the contact record and the deal record, and create the deal and update it with information. And so just make it so much easier to actually create and manage your deals and tickets. And then you can use automation to say, now that I've created the deal, I've assigned it to a contact, and it hasn't been updated in the last, in 3 days, I'm going to actually run a workflow that says that deal hasn't been updated since it was created. You haven't worked it, we're going to reassign it to someone else, for example. So you can use automation to really not just create the ticket or the deal, but also just take it one step further and automate that follow-up process. Maybe the person who it was assigned to is on leave and it needs to be reassigned to somebody else while they're not available. So all of that is an option.
Also,
and as a yes.
Yeah, also just the short story about the client of ours, which we're working on now. It's especially useful if you use HubSpot products. For example, if you have some products which are quite identical and you have a sales team of several people and they need to create a deal every time that someone wants an offer, for example, of a specific product. And in our specific case, every deal needs to be described with all the details of those products. And you know, there are a lot of specifications. If you have to do this manually, every time someone asks you for a quote and the product is the same some of the times, again, this would take a lot of time. And what HubSpot can do for you is to copy all the information from one deal to another without you needing to copy this one by one. For example, models, types of things, and so on. Everything, every particle of this again can be automated, which would again save much of your time.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, talking about deal and ticket creation, you can also do lead rotation. So a lead rotator is a really simple workflow to assign deals. Instead of getting the sales manager to receive an email and then go and manually assign to different people within the team, you can set up a team within HubSpot and rotate the leads between various reps within your team. One thing to note about this is available for sales, professional, and enterprise, and not available on the marketing tool. But if you're using the sales tool, it's a really good tool to make sure that hot leads don't get cold. It's assigned to a rep immediately and removes the friction from the fact that you're no longer having to wait for a person to reassign those leads.
Yeah, exactly. This is really useful, especially this feature, I would say, especially from my experience, it's really great if the company is more than small. It's like middle or large enterprise. And if you have a big team of salespeople or service people, and every one of them is responsible for different types of your product or different models, this is a perfect way to automate when, for example, you have an inquiry for something, and by some keywords, the automation can say this inquiry would go to this person, to this colleague, and the other inquiry would go to the other person. And again, this saves the saves time for saves the time of just one person, who would otherwise do this, every almost the whole day.
Yeah. And then one really cool, and this is one of my favorite things that HubSpot can do, is sending internal notifications. So internal notifications could be as simple as, you know, someone fills in a form, you know, contacts us, sends a lead notification to the salesperson based on that criteria. So if you're not choosing deals, sends an email. But it could be so much more than that. It can be notifying a sales rep when one of their leads goes onto a specific page, or notifying somebody about a whole bunch of different things. And internal emails, so you see here it says enrollment criteria, they have at least one page view, send an internal notification. That internal notification can be sent as a, and I'm going to jump into an example here. So just jumping into this example, you'll see that when you say send internal notification, there's now an option to send an internal email notification, but you can also send an internal marketing email if you're sending a contact, if you're using a contact workflow. An internal notification is a simple plain text email that you create from the deal properties or whatever the object of your workflow is for those properties. And there's no real tracking on that. But you can use an internal marketing email, which then you can track looking at the marketing tool. You can actually get analytics to see whether the, for example, the sales reps are actually opening those emails. So you have the option to do this internal email, and within the contacts tool, the internal marketing email. Keep in mind, and I know that this might seem obvious, so I do apologize if it's obvious, but that the personalization tokens that you use within these internal emails is about the contact or deal that triggered the contact that you're emailing. It's about the contact that triggered the workflow and not the contact you're sending the email to. So if I choose a person to send an email to, so okay, I'm sending it to myself, the deal tokens that I'm using here will not be about me. They'll be about whoever triggered the email to me. And that's just an important one, because internal versus external emails, if you sent an external email off of this workflow, you would then be sending it to the contact, and that could be really strange. So just keep in mind that difference for lead notifications.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. So there's as I said, many examples, and one of the examples of, many examples of workflows and things that you can do. One of the next examples is re-engagement. So you can use a workflow to determine that someone has not been on your website for the last 3 months, 6 months, whatever that should be, and then say, well, why don't we send them an email so that we try and get them back to our website? Why don't we look at those people that are leads and go, they haven't engaged with us in a certain period of time, and follow up with them. And you can automate all of that. You don't have to pull a list and manually send it. HubSpot will do that so that you can constantly keep your leads remembering you, keep your company top of mind, without having to do the heavy lifting. The next automation I want to look at is an automation that's only available in the sales tool. It's available only in Sales Pro and Enterprise, but it's a really cool one. It's about stale deal alerts. So a stale deal is a deal that hasn't been updated in a certain amount of time, and that's going to depend on your sales process. It was created more than a certain number of days ago, and it still hasn't moved to lost or disqualified or won, or it's actually past the close date. So the close date has passed and the deal's still sitting there. So what you could do is you could notify the sales rep, send them a task, or notify the sales manager to reassign that deal. So there's just an option. This is a template available within HubSpot. So out of those pre-made templates that are already there, but it's one that people often forget about, and one that people who are using the sales tools to manage their pipeline find really, really helpful, because it means that deals never just go into the black hole of deals that have just fallen, that you've forgotten about. They stay top of mind, and you make sure that no deal gets missed.
Yeah. And something else to add here, which is a little away from workflows, but again, is really, really a great feature of HubSpot, is about reports. Apart from being able to create a great amount and a great number of reports inside HubSpot, if you decide to invest in the versions of HubSpot, in marketing professional, sales professional versions, you have the ability and so you have the opportunity to create a lot of reports. Some of them HubSpot will offer to you, and some of them you need to be creative enough, and knowing your strategy, you will know exactly what you want to track. And especially for this example here, it would be really nice if you you know your deal processes, what your deal stages are, and it would be great if you put some standards. For example, what is the optimal amount of time for a certain deal to be in this stage, and what would be the amount of time which would be appropriate for a deal to be in another stage. And when you create a report which would track this, you would be able to see if you have some deals, again, if you which are not following your trends, which are not observing those standards. And thanks to this kind of workflow, thanks to this idea here that Nicole is showing, you will be able to prevent this in a really simple way.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just removes the friction, makes it really easy for your salespeople to focus on, you know, what they may have forgotten or missed.
Yes.
Cool. So jumping back to another marketing example, you can use nurturing not just for nurturing off of some kind of lead nurturing based on someone's behavior, but you can use it for lesson-based nurturing, almost signing people up for like an automated lesson plan that you can send them every day or every week. You can actually sign them up and go every Tuesday, send this person a mail with you know, this training material for this week. And you can use them to educate people about your product. And we know that leads that are educated about your product are far easier to sell to than leads that know nothing about your product. So it's absolutely such an easy one to set up. Any one of your salespeople or marketing people within your team will have the information to be able to set up this kind of workflow. And all you have to do is package it and send it off.
Yeah, and also something else, I think such kind of a workflow is a good idea to implement for B2C and B2B organizations, both of those types. But from our experience, what we have observed, it's a really perfect way to let your followers, your contacts be on top of everything when it comes to some B2B products and B2B services, which usually have longer sales cycles and for which you need more nurturing than the usual B2C products. So such types of lesson-based nurturing workflows do amazing work. I can verify this. Because really the nurturing part in B2B is the key to success.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that is quite difficult, because we spoke a few minutes ago about the human-to-human element of marketing, the fact that you're not talking to some company or, you know, you're not speaking to the wall, you're speaking to a contact, a specific person within HubSpot. So if a contact actually leaves the company, and maybe sometimes you get that obligatory, you get a mail saying, you know, thank you so much, it was nice working for you, I'm leaving the company. But sometimes they don't let you know that they're leaving, or you know, you miss that communication. If you've got a list set up in HubSpot that says an email address from a contact who's a customer or potentially an evangelist bounces, or you can see that after a period of time they haven't actually engaged. So for example, you've got a contact that's always on your website, they're always replying to your emails, they're engaging, and suddenly they stop. You can then set up an automation that sends the contact owner a task that says, give this person a call and see what's going on with them. If they have in fact left the company, you could then set up a task to create a new company record for that contact, to ask them where they're working now, connect with the new points of contact at the company, and you can actually assign all of those tasks. And based on their new industry, it might be an if-then branch to a different rep because of the different industries. So this could get a little bit more complex, but essentially just automating the fact that if a lead has stopped engaging, so similar to the re-engagement side on the marketing point of view, your sales team should be aware if an engaging contact suddenly stops engaging. So this is both for left the company or stopped engaging. And it's a really cool automation that you can build so that you make sure that you're keeping an eye, that sounds terrible, but that you're making sure that you're looking after your contacts and using automation to assist you with that process.
Yeah, Nicole, would you show what the trigger of this workflow would be?
Sure. I'm actually going to show the full workflow. Give me a moment.
Good. Okay, meanwhile, if someone has questions, any comments or feedback, we would be glad to answer and discuss both Spitfire Inbound, where Nicole works, and Limacon, where we are from, works really a lot with workflow, so probably would be nice to answer some of your questions. All right, so we have this here.
Yes, so this is the trigger. So I've said life cycle stage is evangelist or customer, and they haven't converted, they haven't had any conversion in 6 weeks, or they haven't had a page view in 6 weeks. And you could set that up based on what your conversion, you could say hasn't opened a blog email. So you could set up based on what you consider engagement for your company. But this is obviously the example that I've set up. They haven't converted, filled in a form, been on our website in 6 weeks. If any of our contacts that we speak to all the time suddenly disappeared for 6 weeks, hopefully someone notices before 6 weeks. But yeah, I think it's an important one to have. And then what you would do is potentially send an email to the contact owner and then set up those automations. So if they have left the company, you're going to follow all those tasks, and if they haven't, you're going to do nothing. And potentially that's a red flag in terms of something that's going on within the company. So it's, it builds out both that red flag and the updating the records.
Yes. Okay. I think this is really useful. A lot of our clients are really having this kind of problem and issue, tracking who needs to be left in their database and who is really a live contact and who needs to be removed, to be deleted from the database. And such a workflow would really do this thing. And especially for people who are using CRM or HubSpot for more than a year, I think such kind of workflow would be obligatory.
Yeah, absolutely. I see there's a question in the chat about, there's lots of platforms for automation. Why choose HubSpot? And I think that the answer for me, so I've used I took a little detour from my HubSpot experience for a short period of time and worked on other marketing automation software. Before I was at Spitfire, at Spitfire Inbound, I worked with a company where we moved to a different automation platform that I won't name. But it was so difficult to use, and I'd used HubSpot before, and when I started to use that platform, I thought, well, it's got some nice features. I mean, don't get me wrong, all of them have got some gimmicks and nice features, but HubSpot is so intuitive to use. And one thing I really love about it is that they're constantly updating the platform. They're constantly adding features. So just in the last week, they added an option to choose a delay based on a specific time or date. Whereas before you could only say, I want to delay for 3 hours or 3 days or 3 months, whatever the number is, you can change those numbers. Now you can actually say, I want to delay this and send it on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. So, for example, but it just gives you that flexibility. So people put features requests in the HubSpot community, and HubSpot listens and actually builds those. And that for me is quite a powerful thing, because it says to me that this is a growing platform that's growing with technology and growing with where we're going as a business. So the fact that they don't sit still, and that their developers are constantly bringing out new things, is one of the reasons that I would choose HubSpot, and then for ease of use. So yeah, I hope that answers that. But I do think it is a good question, because there are so many tools out there. How do you know which one's right for you? Well, which one's got all the functionality and going to grow with the functionality you're going to need in the future.
Okay.
So as we move into the last few examples, these are some sort of examples of slightly more complex challenges that were posed to us. So if you potentially using some of these tools, you might find them useful. And what I've done is shown the map out, where we've mapped out what we've done. Because as I said to you, start with the goal, workflow it, a whiteboard what you're going to do. So we were asked, what can you do with the data in a third-party tool like SurveyMonkey? And like, for example, if you're using a survey tool like SurveyMonkey, you're going, there's so much rich data in this tool, but how do I then do something with all that data? Well, firstly, you can then integrate HubSpot and your third-party tool using those out-of-the-box integrations, and then you can set properties based on the answers that people have done. So that's the option over there, and I'll show this to you in HubSpot in a moment. You can send a follow-up email. So if a person responds to your survey in SurveyMonkey, you can then respond from HubSpot and go, thanks for filling out our survey, and either send them a thank you gift card, if that's your process, or you can just say, thank you very much, here's a piece of content, or you can, based on their answers, go, I see you're struggling with this, here's something to help you. And then you can also set contact properties. So I've used the example over here of setting personas based on the answers people gave within the survey. So you can see that was created here within HubSpot. So I mapped it out and then built it out in the workflows. And it can be as simple or complex as you need it to be, but the data that you've got within the one tool then pulls into HubSpot and allows you to bring one source of truth about that contact and pull all that information together.
Yeah, and here we have the example with SurveyMonkey, which is totally different. Another tool for digital tool for collecting information from customers and potential clients. And just to look at the things look from the bigger picture, let's say, we should say that HubSpot is among the platforms that have the biggest number of native integrations. And in fact, when you integrate another totally different instrument with HubSpot, you can include it in automations as well. So it really takes just several minutes to do this. And the work that you can do after that is, again, great, because you can then start automating processes connected with payroll, with invoices, with HR processes, and so on, with webinars if you want, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've used SurveyMonkey as an example here, but I think that there's so many opportunities to pull your data together, and that means that you can work in a as you say, a payroll or HR tool that you're comfortable with, and then pull the data into HubSpot. So you don't need to redo all your processes to use HubSpot. HubSpot then just integrates all of that and becomes that source of truth.
Yes, exactly.
So many people, in terms of process, one of the examples of workflows where we looked at, where people said, well, they've got a process where they want to create deals from an email, that's been sent to somebody. So what they were doing before this, and this is an example of a client of ours, what they were doing before was that they would have an email inbox, and a person would receive the email, get the email, and then they'd create the deal manually. And they would say, okay, based on this email, I'm going to create a deal. And they said, well, is there a way to take an email inbox and use that email inbox to actually create a deal? And this was an example of a workflow that's I hope that you bear with me. I know it looks scary when I push to the next slide. You'll see the diagram is a little crazy. Ooh, sorry again. Little crazy looking, but it's 3 workflows in one. So it's quite a big one. But essentially, there is a way to take the email that you're receiving in your team email and get that to become a workflow. And talking through the process, what you would do is use 3 different tools. You would use the conversations inbox, which is available in every version of HubSpot. So from the free all the way to the enterprise version, which allows you to integrate a team email into HubSpot and then assign and track those emails in there. You would use that to create a ticket and a custom property, and then pull that custom property into a workflow that says, okay, if the email, for example, the subject line contains the word quote, we would then create a deal. So if it doesn't say quote, we would just leave it. But if it says quote, we would then go, okay, I want to create a deal. And then you would create deals for the different team members. And then using our lead rotator, we would use a deal workflow to then create, to update the deal so that, so because the deal is in a certain stage and it's in a certain pipeline, we would say, okay, now we want to add an owner and rotate that deal to different owners. And that's how you could have multiple teams of people getting an email in an inbox that goes to info at, and you would then from there be able to go and create relevant deals and assign them to the right person. Not instantly, but almost. Obviously, the steps within the tool take a few moments. So how did we do this? Well, there's a couple of steps which I'll take you through. The first one is that you can create a ticket. So you can automatically create a ticket in HubSpot by switching in the conversations inbox. If you switch this toggle on, it will create and assign a ticket to a specific person automatically from the free version of HubSpot. So any version of HubSpot does this. So if you're wondering if it's available to everyone. Okay, what you can do there is also set particular properties in that ticket. So for example, you could, if the word quote is in there, like all of those things, you can set it, you can name the ticket based on the subject of the email. Okay, then what you would do is you would go and say, based off of one of the properties we used, because now you've got to run a deal workflow. So you're gonna run a workflow off of that ticket property, and you're going to say, because that ticket property is known, you're going to copy a property to the deal property. So there we go. So you're going to, because that ticket property is known, you're going to ask the question, okay, does this email have the subject quote? No, we do nothing. Yes, we say, okay, let's create this property in the deal and this is for reporting. So you don't have to do this, but I would really recommend that you use properties to help you understand and segment your contacts for reporting. Because if you don't set this property, how are you going to know that which deals were created off of this workflow and how effective this process is? I mean, there are ways of doing it, but this is the most simple. And then you would decide and say, okay, based on the different teams, and you can see as this is an example. I didn't build out all of these, but you can create the tickets off of there. So now you've created a deal where the deal's name is new deal, ticket name, and the ticket is actually the subject of your email. So it'll be new deal, please can I have a quote? Okay, and then you're going to go to the deal rotation, and you're going to say, okay, now that you've created that deal within a particular pipeline at a particular stage, and it's got that known property, now we're going to rotate the deal by team. So essentially, you've gone from an email in an inbox all the way to a deal assigned to a person, and they've been notified that they've got a deal waiting for them with all the information that they need in the deal. And any contacts, companies, or ticket records that were associated with that original email can be associated along the way to this property, so that all those properties can actually be associated with each other.
Yeah, yeah. This is I would say amazing, because some of the people who are into HubSpot would understand, because such a workflow goes into almost every object of HubSpot, and it incorporates so many things inside of it that it's really blowing your mind.
Cool. Well, so we move on to one more example as we nearing half past. So the last example is a way to do just that. So I mentioned to you a moment ago that you can use properties to create reports.
Yes.
And one of our clients said to us, well, they've send out very high value emails, and on those high value emails they get lots and lots of clicks on 10 different links or whatever it is. I think it was between 6 and 10, and they actually need to report visually on how many clicks they receive. So if I say to them, okay, within the email tool there's a report, but it just gives you the numbers, they say, well, that doesn't help them. So I said, well, okay, can we use a workflow to create that report? So what we did is assigned each call to action a property within the workflow tool. So this was a very high value email, and you obviously wouldn't do this for every single email, but they set up the properties and said property 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, each of these have a different name. And then what they did is they set up a report, and they could immediately visually see. So they use this to get the final numbers, and then the pie chart to report on the percentages. And now they can say people clicked on A and not B, and C and not D. And that was just a nice example to where using properties and the concept, as you mentioned earlier about reporting, is a whole nother webinar that you're going to have to run around building custom reports. But I think it is absolutely critical to know that you can update properties and then use that within your reporting, and the power of combining the two so that you get the best quality data, keeping your database clean, is just a really critical way of using HubSpot. You definitely don't want to make it somebody's job to manually update data, and this is just one way to do that.
Yeah. Okay, Nicole, we have a question in the chat from Galina. She says that she's really much into the situation that we talked about earlier. They're in a period where they want to clean up their database really, and she wants to know when is the time to give up on someone and when we should continue fighting on them.
Okay. So I think that the one thing that you can do there is using your list criteria. So you've got within your database, you've got that list of people. You'll see on every email send, you've got the option to choose don't send to unengaged contacts. So HubSpot uses the criteria of 11 email sends that you haven't sent to. So you could say you could give up on those people, but I don't quit that easily. So you could use the re-enrollment, the re-engagement workflow that we looked at earlier, going if they're on that list or if they haven't engaged in 6 months, and that's going to depend on your sales process, your sales cycle, how engaged your contact database is. But once you determine, okay, our database engages with us regularly, so every 3 months we want to send them a re-engagement campaign, we want to ask questions, etc., then you're going to send them that re-engagement campaign. And if they don't engage with the re-engagement campaign, because that's what we use to clean up the database and make sure that our contacts are alive, as in real people, and not, left the company or whatever's happened, that they're still there and active. But it also means that at the end of it, so we've used the example of what we call a breakup email. So at the end of that re-engagement, you say, thank you so much, but now that you still haven't answered me, and I've spoken to you now, I've sent you all of these things, you can very politely say, I can see that you're no longer interested. Click this button if you'd like to stay. Otherwise, I'm going to remove you from the database. And that's a very nice way of going, if they don't then click the call to action, you're going to remove them from the database. So that's what I would try. I would try a strong re-engagement campaign that ends with one of those sort of breakups that say, okay, if you don't click the button, I'm going to remove you, and then see what happens. We've done that quite successfully, where sometimes when we say to people, we're going to remove you, and we actually get more subscribes, because people go, oh no, please don't remove me. Don't, just a word of warning on that one. If you say we're going to, remove you from the database, be very careful that you are conscious of the fact that you don't want to stop them being a customer. So if they're a customer, just be very careful that you make it clear you're removing them from communication, from email marketing communications, not canceling their contract with you or whatever it is. Based on some experience we've had, I've noticed that. Cool, thanks for the question.
And I would ask additional question for this. Some people and some companies tend to try out and combine both approaches, outbound approach and inbound approach. And if this would be really relevant when it comes to the inbound approach, what would you advise if, for example, we have some email lists and some emails that we scrape from the internet, for example, and then we send cold emails to them? Or how much should we push it then, and when should we stop?
Yeah, I mean, I would firstly be mindful of whatever data protection we're very conscious of it here in South Africa, because Poppy's coming into play quite soon at the end of the month. So yeah, be very conscious of that. You don't want to offend people or upset people. It can be an expensive and damaging exercise, both for your reputation and obviously the costs of that. But I would say that it very much depends on how the quality of that data. I won't send anything to a database that I haven't verified. So even if we get a list from a customer, where they say, please, can you send this email to this group of people? We verify that using a tool like Never Bounce to actually make sure that those are valid email addresses. So I would firstly do that. And then, send them an email, but just, and see what the engagement is. But just be aware of the fact that as long as it's legal and verified, that would be my best practice. I would say that if you're getting lists from somewhere and you're not sure about the data, those verification tools are super easy to use. Neverbounce integrates with HubSpot. And yeah, I would start there and then see what kind of data you have. Yeah, making sure that you're obeying the rules as well.
Yeah. Okay. If you have any other questions or some comments or feedback, now is the time to ask. Otherwise, I think Nicole shared with us some really valuable things from my point of view as a person who is almost every day doing some automation and workflows. I think, Nicole, really honestly, what you shared is applicable in not almost, but I think every business which is going to take the path to digitalization and automation. So I'm really grateful for this. I believe that if a company takes this role seriously and really decides to start automation processes, they can really increase their ROI, their internal investments in the long term. So please think of this if you haven't started using automation, because as I said earlier, it's getting more and more common, and I can say that my firm belief is that in future most of the successful companies will use such automation tools, and if you want to be among those successful companies, you need to start thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would encourage you, as I said, to start thinking about how else you can use automation. So I hope that I've challenged you to push how you use automation, to expand the way you use it, and to think about workflows and automation as more than just, you know, sending off one email. So I really hope that I've challenged that, pushed that boundary just a little bit. So thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks everyone for sticking around.
Yeah. Okay, well, Nicole, great pleasure again. Thank you for being here and for really putting this effort to make such a nice presentation and illustrate everything. This was really nice, again, to show everything, how it's done in practice and to visualize it. Thank you very much. It's really appreciated. For everyone who hasn't had the time to watch us, we are having a recording. We're going to spread the recording, and our nice community builders here are going to write an article on this. So there are a lot of ways you can get informed about what we have talked about. Okay, well, I think that's everything for now. Nicole, wish you a great evening and many more successful HubSpot implementation projects ahead. And I hope we'll have the chance to have an event sometime in the future. Hope it will be quite soon. And that's it for now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.